UEFA just released the matchups for the new Champions League format. This is the first time that the format changes since 2003. So that's about 20 years since anything's changed. Why all of a sudden the sudden change? I think they already had been planning something like this because it had been a while. They wanted to keep the interest high, but also because of the pressure that they were getting from the Super League that was getting ready to take over with all the big teams. So I feel like they felt like they needed to make a change. Now, it's pretty complicated. I'm not going to lie. I'm just as confused as you guys probably are. So we're going to try and simplify it so that we all understand and we know what's going on. It's actually not that crazy complicated, but it is a completely different format. So we're going to bring up this little chart here. So each team is going to play 8 matches in the league phase, or whatever they call it. It's basically the group phase. 4 home and 4 away. There's 4 pots now, and these 4 pots from pot 1, 2, 3, and 4. The best teams are in the first pot. The worst teams are in the last pot. So they're going to play 2 teams from each pot, so that it's pretty fair who they're playing. And then all of the points get added to a single league table, which means that out of all 36 teams, because there's an increase this year, instead of 32, now there's 36 teams. All 36 teams are in the same table, regardless of the fact that they're playing 8 different opponents than everyone else. So at the end of the league phase, or whatever they call it, the group phase, top 8 in the table go to the round of 16 directly. They will skip the round of 32, which is obviously a new addition because of the more teams that have been added. Teams 9 through 24 will play for the round of 16 for the last 8 spots remaining in the round of 16, and teams 25 through 36 are out. They don't go to the Europa League. They don't get any incentives. They get straight kicked out. So let's look at the actual pots so you can see what I'm saying by the quality of the team. So in pot 1, you have all of the best teams: Real Madrid, Manchester City, Bayern Munich, Paris Saint-Germain, Liverpool, Inter, Dortmund, Leipzig, and Barcelona. In pot 2, it's the next level, the next category of teams, which is Leverkusen, Atletico Madrid, Atalanta, Juventus, Benfica, Arsenal, Bruges, Shakhtar Donetsk, AC Milan. And obviously pot 3 is a little bit worse. Pot 4 is technically the worst teams that qualified for the Champions League. So, for example, I'm going to show you guys how the 8 games come into play. So, Arsenal, for example, are going to play from pot 1, PSG and Inter Milan. From pot 2, they're going to play Shakhtar Donetsk and Atalanta. Pot 3, they're going to play Dinamo Zagreb and Sporting Lisbon. And pot 4, AS Monaco and Girona. Now, keep in mind that out of these 8 teams, they're going to go to 4 of them and play away at 4, and 4 of them they're going to play at home. So that's a little bit different because you are no longer playing teams at home and away. So depending on where you're going to end up going, I don't know, is there an advantage? Is there a disadvantage? Ultimately, I think they've divided the pots pretty evenly so that everyone plays different calibers of teams. And as complicated as it gets with the league table, it kind of all really makes sense. So that's kind of the format of it. The criticisms, we'll get into the negatives first, is there are more matches. All right, so now that they've added the round of 32, if you finish in the top 8 in the league phase, you can have a maximum of 15 matches total. In the old format, the maximum was 13 because they didn't have the round of 32. So now you'd go straight into the 16. So a total of 13 matches. So you play 2 more matches if you finish in the top 8. If you finish in those spots 9 through 24, you could have a potential of up to 17 matches, which is 4 more matches than the old format. That presents a serious problem because 4 matches is essentially a month of games. If you think about a regular league, 4 matches is 1 per weekend. You're adding an entire month of workload to these teams. That is the biggest criticism of them all, especially when they're already being criticized, or the players are already criticizing these organizations for the fact that there's already way too many games in a calendar year. So injuries are going to be playing a big part, and not only injuries in the Champions League, but obviously this is going to affect when the teams go back to their domestic leagues, what their availability is for their players. So a lot of teams, I think, in the transfer window have really focused, or all the ones that are qualified for the Champions League have really focused on improving their squad depth to make sure that at the end of the year, or at the end of the season, they're not playing with half their academy as their starting 11. Besides that, is there any other negatives? The only one I can really think of off the top of my head is the fact that instead of preparing for, at least in the group stage, instead of preparing for 3 opponents, where tactically that's a lot easier than preparing for 8 opponents. So instead of being able to kind of recycle the information, knowing all the formations and all the players that you're playing against, you have 8 different teams. That's a lot more workload for the coaching staff to scout the opposition. And that's also a lot more workload for the players. When games are happening midweek and then you got games at the weekend for your regular leagues, this is just a lot of information. And I think it presents a problem from that side of things. From that side of things was like the tactical analysis and the scouting the opposition. So that's the negatives. The positives. Here's what I actually really like about it and what a lot of people are saying. It's exciting when you're trying to keep up with the league table. Just like we watch the Premier League, we're always keeping up to see who's on top of the table. And the table changes week in and week out. Whereas in the old format, it's just group stage games. I feel like a lot of people skip the group stage game or watching the group stage game unless there was some really interesting matchups. And they would really only start tuning in the round of 16 when games got really good. Now, I feel like everyone is going to be keeping up to date with all of the matches because they all affect the league standings and the league table. So I think that part makes it really interesting. And just the fact that, for example, I'm a big fan of the Premier League. I keep up with the table all the time. It's going to be so fun to have another league table that I'm also keeping up with and seeing how all of the teams are doing. So I think that's one of the reasons why there's going to be more engagement, which ultimately leads to more people tuning in and more money for UEFA and the organizers. So that's pretty much the format. Let me know in the comment section what you guys think. They already released the matchups for each team, as I said. However, the schedule is going to be released in the next couple days on Saturday, August 31st. So we'll see exactly the order of the fixtures. And it's going to really present some interesting matchups, I think, especially when there's a potential that you might end up playing against someone from the same country as you and how that affects you in your actual regular domestic league. So, let me know. Hopefully I explained it as best as I could and you guys understand. Like I said, I'm still a little bit confused trying to wrap my head around it all. But let me know positives, negatives in the comment section down below what you guys think.